The air hung heavy with soot and sweat as the distant clanging of metal filled the atmosphere. Deep within the sprawling expanse of Kolar Gold Fields, life revolved around darkness. The miners, their faces etched with exhaustion, toiled endlessly, breaking rocks and hauling burdens under the watchful eyes of Garuda's ruthless guards. Shadows moved between the beams of dim lanterns, casting jagged patterns on the walls of the mines. Among these shadows was Rocky, standing apart, observing everything with piercing eyes that seemed to burn through the gloom. He wasn't like the others. Where they saw chains, he saw opportunity. Where they saw oppression, he saw cracks that could be exploited. He knew this wasn't just a gold mine. It was a fortress of power and fear, ruled by a man who thought himself untouchable. Rocky's journey to this moment had been anything but ordinary. Born into poverty, he had learned the brutal truths of survival early in life. His mother, frail but fierce, had been his guiding light. On her deathbed, she had told him, "The world remembers the strong, Rocky. Promise me you will be the strongest of them all." Those words were etched into his soul, and they had carried him through years of struggle, danger, and ambition. Now, standing on the threshold of destiny, he surveyed the mine. He saw men broken by years of servitude, their spirits crushed by Garuda's iron grip. He saw families who had lost their loved ones to the greed of the powerful. And he saw his own reflection in their plight, a boy who had once been powerless, but had refused to remain so. Garuda ruled not just through fear, but through spectacle. His every action was a reminder of his dominance. If a miner dared to step out of line, punishment was swift and public. Rocky had witnessed it firsthand. A worker, caught stealing scraps of food for his child, had been dragged into the center of the mine and beaten until he couldn't stand. The message was clear. Rebellion was futile. But Rocky wasn't a man who bowed to messages. He watched, studied, and waited. He moved through the shadows, listening to the murmurs of discontent that whispered through the darkness. The miners spoke of freedom in hushed tones, their voices trembling with both fear and hope. They didn't yet know it, but they had already found their leader. A plan was forming in Rocky's mind, though he kept it hidden behind a mask of indifference. He knew the time wasn't right, not yet. To challenge Garuda was to challenge a god, and gods didn't fall without strategy and strength. But Rocky also knew that all it took was one crack, one moment of weakness, to bring a giant to its knees. As the shift ended and the workers shuffled back to their makeshift quarters, Rocky lingered. His eyes locked onto Garuda in the distance, a silent promise passing through the air. The king of K.G.F had no idea that his reign was already beginning to crumble. Rocky would make sure of it. The tension in the air was palpable, growing thicker with each passing day. Whispers of unrest floated through the mine like smoke from a dying fire, subtle yet undeniable. Rocky had begun planting the seeds of rebellion, moving quietly but deliberately. He started small, offering hope to the miners in ways they hadn't experienced in years. A stolen loaf of bread here, a word of encouragement there. Each act was a brick in the foundation he was building. The miners, beaten into submission by Garuda's regime, were slow to trust. Years of brutality had taught them that defiance only led to suffering. But Rocky was different. He didn't just speak of change, he radiated it. His confidence was infectious, his resolve unshakable. Slowly, the spark he carried ignited a flicker of courage among the workers. Garuda's control wasn't limited to physical dominance. He controlled the minds of his subjects, keeping them trapped in a cycle of fear and dependency. His guards patrolled relentlessly, their eyes sharp for signs of dissent. Any attempt to organize was met with swift and violent retaliation. Yet Rocky thrived in the shadows, using the very fear Garuda wielded as a weapon against him. One night, as the miners huddled in their barracks, Rocky shared his vision. His voice was low but firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. "This is not life. This is survival," he said, his words carrying the weight of conviction. "We dig gold for a man who treats us like dirt. We've forgotten what it means to live with dignity. But that can change if we stand together." The miners listened, their expressions a mix of skepticism and yearning. They had heard promises before, from men who were quickly silenced by Garuda's wrath. But Rocky was unlike anyone they had ever known. He didn't speak of vague dreams, he outlined a plan. He spoke of coordinated strikes, strategic sabotage, and the power of unity. Still, the fear lingered. "Garuda will kill us all," one miner muttered, his voice trembling. Rocky's gaze hardened, and he stepped closer. "If we do nothing, he's already killed us. We're dead men walking, waiting for a master who doesn't care whether we live or die. But if we fight, we have a chance, not just for us, but for our children." The words hit home, piercing through the layers of fear and resignation. The room fell silent as the miners exchanged glances, their doubts giving way to determination. It wasn't immediate, but a shift began to take place. Rocky's belief became their belief, his courage their courage. Meanwhile, Garuda's men grew suspicious. The whispers had reached their ears, and they intensified their surveillance. They punished the workers with renewed brutality, trying to crush the growing resistance before it could take root. But they underestimated Rocky's resolve. In the midst of the chaos, Rocky worked tirelessly, gathering tools and resources, forming alliances, and solidifying his strategy. He knew that the road ahead would be treacherous, but he welcomed the challenge. For the first time, the miners saw a glimmer of hope, and they were ready to fight for it. The air was thick with anticipation, every sound amplified as if the world itself was holding its breath. The miners had prepared as much as they could with the limited resources at their disposal. Crude tools became weapons, their determination sharpening the edges. Rocky stood at the center of it all, calm but unyielding, his presence alone enough to keep the growing fear at bay. They were outnumbered and outarmed, but they had something Garuda's men didn't: purpose. When the first clash erupted, it was like a dam breaking. The guards, caught off guard by the sheer force of the miners' will, faltered momentarily. Rocky led from the front, his movements calculated but ferocious. Every strike he delivered was a statement, every step forward a declaration of defiance. The chaos spread quickly, engulfing the mine in a storm of rebellion. Garuda's forces regrouped, their superior weaponry giving them an advantage. But the miners didn't back down. They fought with desperation, driven not just by survival, but by the vision Rocky had given them. Each blow they struck carried the weight of years of oppression, each cry a release of pent-up rage. Rocky's voice cut through the chaos, rallying his people. "We don't stop. Not until it's over," he shouted, his words sparking a renewed surge of energy. In the heart of the battle, Rocky faced his greatest challenge yet. Garuda himself had descended into the fray, flanked by his elite guards. He was a towering figure, exuding an aura of dominance that had kept the miners subdued for so long. But Rocky didn't flinch. He knew this was the moment everything had been building toward. Their confrontation was brutal, a clash of wills as much as strength. Garuda fought with the confidence of a man who had never been challenged, but Rocky's determination was unshakable. Each punch, each block, each movement was laced with the weight of his journey. He was fighting not just for himself, but for everyone who had suffered under Garuda's rule. The miners watched, their hope hinging on Rocky's success. The tide of the battle seemed to shift with every exchange, the outcome uncertain. Garuda landed a crushing blow, sending Rocky to his knees. A collective gasp echoed through the crowd, but Rocky's spirit refused to break. He rose, bloodied but resolute, his eyes burning with the fire of his mother's words. With one final surge of strength, Rocky turned the tide. He delivered a blow that sent Garuda staggering, followed by another that brought him to his knees. The silence that followed was deafening, the moment stretching into eternity. Then, with one last strike, Garuda fell, his reign of terror shattered in an instant. The miners erupted into cheers, their cries of triumph echoing through the mine. Rocky stood over Garuda, breathing heavily but victorious. He looked at the faces around him, faces that now held something they hadn't in years: freedom. For the first time, the chains of K.G.F had been broken, and it was only the beginning. The dust settled slowly, as if the world itself needed time to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. The miners stood together, their breaths heavy but filled with the weight of a shared victory. The echoes of their cries rang in the air, but there was no longer fear in them, only the roar of triumph. Garuda was gone, and with him, the reign of terror that had bound them for so long. The sense of freedom was overwhelming, a weight lifted from their shoulders that they hadn't even realized was there. But as the celebrations began to die down, a stillness crept into Rocky's mind. He had fought for this, fought for the freedom of the miners, fought to fulfill the promise made to his mother. But now, standing among them, the future stretched before him like an uncharted path. Victory was just the beginning. What came next would define everything. Rocky surveyed the scene, his mind working with the precision of a man who knew that leadership was not a title, but a responsibility. The miners had gained their freedom, but freedom meant nothing without a future. The chaos that followed Garuda's fall could easily turn into another form of oppression if they were not careful. The people needed more than just freedom. They needed purpose, structure, hope for tomorrow. He gathered the workers together, his voice calm but firm as he spoke. This is our land now. The gold, the mine, everything, it's ours. But we must rebuild. We cannot let the same system that destroyed us take root again. His words were met with nods of agreement, but Rocky could see the hesitation in their eyes. They had known nothing but suffering for so long. Rebuilding would take more than just words. Over the coming weeks, Rocky worked tirelessly to reshape K.G.F. into something new. He implemented changes in the mine's operations, ensuring that the workers were treated fairly, given rest, and paid for their labor. He forged alliances with other miners and workers from surrounding areas, bringing in new resources and knowledge. The fear that once gripped the place had slowly begun to dissipate, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. However, not all was smooth. While most of the miners rallied behind him, there were those who remained loyal to the old ways. They saw the system that had kept them in line for so long as the only one that worked. These individuals whispered among themselves, unsure of the new order that Rocky was establishing. They wanted stability, but were unwilling to let go of the old comforts. Rocky knew this, but he didn't let it deter him. He had fought for change, and he would see it through, no matter how many obstacles lay in his path. One evening, as he stood overlooking the vast stretch of the mine, the sound of distant voices reached his ears. A group of men approached, their faces hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. They were familiar, thugs from Garuda's old crew, who had disappeared after his death. They were not here for peace, but for power. The arrival of these men was a reminder that the past would never truly stay buried. Rocky's hand instinctively went to the grip of the weapon at his side, but he forced himself to remain calm. He had learned that fear was a tool, and he would not let it control him. He had defeated Garuda, and he would not let remnants of the old regime reclaim what they had lost. The confrontation was inevitable, but Rocky wasn't just prepared for battle. He was prepared to lead. He would deal with these threats the same way he had dealt with everything else, by facing them head-on, knowing that his vision for K.G.F. would guide him through whatever challenges lay ahead. As he walked toward the approaching men, he felt a new sense of clarity. He had come a long way since the days when he had wandered these mines, a boy with nothing but a dream. Now he was a man with a purpose, a leader who would take K.G.F. from the ashes and build something worthy of its people. And no matter what came next, he would see it through. His journey was far from over.